Hi, welcome back to the Photoshop training channel. I'm Jesus Ramirez. As you can see, this video is going to be very different than all the ones that I've done in the past. First of all, I'm not at my studio, as you can see. This is the very first video that I'm recording during the COVID 2020 lockdown. I hope that you're staying healthy and safe. Let me know in the comments below how you're doing. I'm doing really good. I'm just living that lockdown life like I'm sure that you are. And this video will also be different because this will be the very first video of my new series, Copycat Wednesday. Copycat Wednesday will be a series where I recreate a movie poster, an album cover, a book cover, a color grade from a movie, your favorite Instagrammer's style, anything goes. In this very first Copycat Wednesday, I asked my Facebook group to give me ideas. And I got a suggestion from Kenneth Darcy Brown to recreate the Perfume movie poster. I haven't seen that movie. I don't know if it's any good, but I like the movie poster and we will recreate it. If you've seen the movie, let me know how it was. And there's a lot of time to watch movies nowadays, so maybe it's a movie that I could check out. But the movie poster is great and I'll be recreating it in Photoshop. For this Copycat Wednesday series, I'm just going to use Photoshop and it's going to be my take on it. I don't know how the original artist created the images, but I'm going to give it my best to recreate it and show you how I did it. Also, if you have any ideas for future Copycat Wednesdays, leave them down below in the comments. I'm going to look for more ideas on my Facebook group on this video, so make sure that you leave your suggestions. So why don't we jump right into the tutorial? I'm going to start from scratch by creating a new document. Click on the Create New button to create a new document. And I'm going to create a document that is fairly small, 600 by 890, and then I'll click on Create. And the reason that I'm creating a new document is so that I can work a little faster. Next, I'm going to organize my document so that it's easier to work with. I'll create 3 groups. The group at the bottom, I will call Background. This is where I will place the layers for my background. The group in the center will be my Models layer. And the group on top will be the flowers. That way everything is organized. I don't want to use the original background as my background layer, so I'll go into the new adjustment layer icon, select the solid color fill layer, and then I'll select a dark gray, press OK, and I'll delete the original background layer by dragging it into the trash icon. Then I'll rename the color fill layer to background. And I'll right click on the layer mask and select delete layer mask. You don't have to delete it, but it's just a habit of mine to delete the layer mask that I don't need. So now I'll place the background layer into the background group. So there it is. I'm going to come back and work on the background a little later on, but for now I'm going to focus on the model layer. And if I go into the libraries panel, you will see a library with all the assets that I'm going to use for this tutorial. I'll place a link to each individual file down below in the description. They're Adobe stock images. You can license them if you would like to remove the watermark. If not, you can work with the free watermark versions. But I'm going to click on this image of this woman and I'm going to place her inside of that model group. And let me make sure that she's really in there. And there she is inside of that group. And this is the main image that I'm going to work with. First, I'm going to go into Select, Subject. This will use Adobe Sensei, Adobe's artificial intelligence, to make a selection out of the main subject of this image, which is, of course, the woman that you see there. Then I can click on the layer mask icon to mask out the background. And with the layer mask selected, I can go into Select and Mask. The Select and Mask workspace allows you to refine the edges of your mask. Currently, I'm in the black and white view. Basically, this shows you what the mask looks like. White reveals, black conceals. And the only thing that I'm concerned about at the moment is the edges of this mask. I'm going to use the global refinements to refine those edges. I'll increase the smooth to just get a smoother edge, and I'll increase the contrast to make it sharper, like so. I'll press OK, and that's all I need for now. If your image still has a white halo, this white outline, some fringing going around the edges, what you can do is have your layer mask selected, then go into Filter, Other, Minimum. The minimum filter allows you to contract your mask based on the number of pixels that you input under radius. Right now I have it set to 1.3, but if I increase it, you can see that it contracts the mask even further. So I'm just going to leave it at maybe 1 pixel, just to come in 1 pixel inward. Also under preserve, I'll make sure that roundness is selected. This is the algorithm that Photoshop uses when it determines how to preserve the edges of your mask. For humans and other organic objects, roundness works great, and you can just press OK, and that removes the fringing from my mask. If I double click on the hand tool, you'll see the result there. There's a couple things that I want to fix, like maybe add some of the hair strands that are missing back into her hair. For that, I'm going to go back into the Select and Mask workspace, and I'm going to use the Refine Edge tool, which is this tool here, and I'm just going to paint along the edges around her hair, like so. And you can see on the edges of the mask that Photoshop will bring back hair strands that were lost in the original mask. And I actually want to keep what's inside of her head, so I'm just going to select the brush tool, and I'm just going to paint to add those pixels back in there, like so. And I'll select the Refine Edge brush tool again and bring back her eyelashes. And I'll press OK. And that looks much better. But the only issue now is the fringing around her hair, and that's okay. We'll fix that next. What I'll do to fix that is create a solid color background layer, select black, press OK, and press Ctrl-Alt-G, Command-Option-G on the Mac to clip it to the layer below. A clipping mask means that the layer below controls the visibility of the layer on top. Notice how this black color fill layer removed the white fringing around the edges, but it made the entire layer black. So what I'll do is click on the layer mask and press Ctrl-I, Command-I to invert. Inverting the layer mask makes it black, which means that it will hide all the contents of this layer. Remember, black conceals, white reveals. So we can now go into the brush tool, make sure that white is our foreground color, and we can paint along the edges of her head with white on the layer mask to reveal the black in that layer, making the hair strands black. And I can reduce the size of my brush by tapping on the left bracket key on the keyboard. And it's okay that I make other areas black, as you'll see in a moment. With the effect that we're going for, is not really going to matter much. That looks great. I'm going to double click on the hand tool to fit the image to screen so you can see what we have. Next, I'm going to go into the new adjustment layer icon, create a curves adjustment layer. Make sure that it's clipped to the layer below by clicking on this icon so that it only controls the model layer. Then I'll make the image darker by dragging the white point down. You can think of the curves adjustment layer as a dimmer switch. If you drag a point up, it increases light, therefore making the image brighter. And if you drag down, it decreases light, making the image darker. So I'm dragging the white point down to make the brightest pixels darker. Then click in the center to add a point and drag down to make the image darker. I want the black and white image, so I'll go into the new adjustment layer icon and select black and white, which will of course make my image black and white. Make sure that you click on this icon so that you clip it to the layer below. Next, I'll click on the curves adjustment layer. Then I'll click here to add a point and drag down to make the image darker. And you know what? I think it'll be better if I drag this point out. It only work with this one. And this looks pretty good. By the way, if you want to highlight the side of her body to make it seem as if light is hitting her, what you can do is select the curves adjustment layer mask, then select the brush tool, set black as your foreground color. You can do so by clicking on this icon, then paint on the layer mask with black to hide the effect. If you hide the darkening effect, you can bring back the original bright pixels. And it's totally up to you where you paint the highlights in. Maybe I'll add one down here. Next, I'll paint on her arm to create a highlight here. And it looks like I accidentally got the side of her body here, so I can tap on the X key to swap my foreground and background color. And I can paint with white to reveal the effect, making the image darker. Next, I'll create a highlight on the other side. I'll tap on the X key to make my foreground color black. And I'll paint with black to hide the effect, making that area brighter and creating the illusion of a highlight. And you can keep tapping X to swap between the foreground and background color so that you can paint with black or white and refine the highlight. Next, I'll go into the new adjustment layer icon, create a solid color fill, set it to black, and press OK. And then press Ctrl-Alt-G, Command-Option-G on the Mac to clip it to everything below. Once again, I'll click on the layer mask, and this time instead of using a keyboard shortcut, I could go into the properties panel and click on invert, which makes a black layer mask, and that hides everything in this layer. And now I can simply paint with white to reveal the effect, which will reveal black, of course, and I'm just going to make this bottom area black, like so. And I'll try to keep as much of the highlight as possible. I'm just trying to hide the towel. So I'm just going to paint with white here to reveal the black pixels, like so. I think this is looking really, really good, and it looks like I made everything in the flowers group, not in the model group, so I'll just be lazy and drag the flowers group down above the background, not inside the models group, and I'll just call it model, and I'll call the one on top flowers. I wasn't careful on where I was placing my layers, but that's okay. It was an easy fix, as you saw. So there's my model layer. What I can do now is figure out where I want to place her, so I'm going to select the move tool and maybe move her up a bit, maybe right about here would work. And I'm going to work on the background now. The first thing that I'll do is create a new layer, and I can just paint with black. I can just set black as my foreground color. Make sure that I have a soft brush where the hardness set to 0. And I could just paint while holding shift so that I can draw a straight line like so. So everything below here will be completely black. And that's just to hide the fact that she doesn't have any legs. And I can maybe even increase the size of the brush and just paint one more time just to make those edges a little bit softer, like so. And if that's too much, I can just click and drag this down right about here. And I think that looks pretty good. What I'm going to do now is create a layer above this background layer. I'm going to go back into my libraries panel, and I downloaded this texture, and I'm just going to drag it right there. And it's this texture that you see here, and I'm just going to rotate it like so. And I'm rotating the texture all the way around so that I can see where the brightest area is. And it looks like the brightest area right now is on the top right here. So I'll press Ctrl-T, Command-T to transform, right-click, and flip it horizontal because I want the brightest area to be on the left-hand side. This is where the light is coming from. You can see the light hitting her body from that side. So that's where I want the brightest area of this texture. And now I'm just going to fit it to the background as best as I can. So I'm going to click and drag down, and I'll click on the check mark to commit the changes, and this is our background. Now I'm going to create a highlight on the background, and I'll do so by clicking on the brush tool, setting white as my foreground color, and I'm just going to create a new layer above that texture layer. I'll call it highlight, and I'm just going to paint in here like so. I'll double click to the side of the layer. I'll change the blending mode to color dodge and uncheck this box, transparency shapes layer, and you can see how that changes the blend and it looks more like a highlight now. So now when I select the move tool, I can click and drag that highlight and move it around. That's obviously way too bright, but if I reduce the fill opacity, not the opacity, the fill, you'll reduce the intensity of the light. So I'll reduce it a bit, maybe at about 65%, so that it's not as bright. Next, I'll go back into the new adjustment layer icon, create a curves adjustment layer, click right in the center and drag up to create even a stronger highlight. But now I'm going to make the layer mask black so that it hides that effect. Control-I, Command-I on the Mac. And I'm going to paint with white just to reveal the effect on the top there. And that was a little too much, so I'll undo and I'll try again. Maybe that's better there. And now that I'm looking at it, maybe this highlight needs to be on top of the curves adjustment layer just so I can control it better, and just reduce the fill like so. So now I have that bright highlight right there, and I can reduce the opacity of the curves adjustment layer so that it's not so strong, something like that. Next, I'll work on the smaller details of my image. I've already completed her in the background. All I need to do now is add that one strand of hair over her face and the flowers coming out of her back. Why don't we work with the hair first? So I'm going to go back into the libraries panel, and I've downloaded this Adobe stock image, which is basically a strand of hair. And to see it better, I'm going to go into image rotation, 90 degrees counterclockwise. Next, I'm going to show you a technique called a channel-based mask, which is a technique that allows you to mask difficult to select objects like hair. So first, go into the channels panel. Then you can click on each individual RGB channel, red, green, or blue, and see which one has more contrast between the foreground and background. In this case, it's a blue channel, and I can click and drag that channel into the new channel icon to duplicate it, and I can work on the duplicate channel. The first thing that I'm going to do is press Control-I, Command-I on the Mac to invert that channel. Whatever is white will be selected, so we want the hair to be white, and everything else will not be selected. So what I could do is go into Image, Adjustment, Levels, to adjust the brightness of this channel so I can adjust it accordingly, so I can remove the shadows of the hair here on the bottom. Then I'll press OK and go back in there, Image, Adjustment, Levels, and I'm going to go the other way with this white point to the left, making everything as close as possible to white. And I'll press OK one more time. And what I can do now is paint with white on these hair strands. I don't have to be very precise. They're going to be very small, so I could be loose and not be perfect. And just keep painting until you remove all the larger black areas. Remember, you can always tap on the left and right bracket key on the keyboard to adjust the size of your brush. And this looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is press Control, Command on the Mac, and click on the blue copy channel to load it as a selection. Go back into RGB by clicking on RGB. Then go into the Layers panel and just create a layer mask. And you have the hair masked out. I'm going to now select the Move tool and click and drag the hair onto our working composite and drop it right there. Notice how much bigger that is. We can't even see the transformation handles, so you can press Control-0, that's Command-0 on the Mac, to see the transformation handles. Notice how much bigger this is. So all I'm going to do now is just scale it way down. Now you can see why I wasn't being so precise. You can zoom back into the image by pressing Control-0. And I'm just scaling this way down. Right about here, I'll click on the check mark to commit the changes. And I'll call it hair so that we know what this is. I'm going to drop this hair layer into the models group. I'll open up the group and make sure that the hair layer is selected. Then with the move tool, I can move it into position. I'll zoom in and click on this corner handle and drag up to scale it down. And I'm trying to match it as close as I can to the original. And I'll click and drag up to make this longer. She had some hair coming down her face like so. It doesn't have to be perfect, something like that. And what I'm going to do now is make it into red hair. So I'm going to create a curves adjustment layer. Make sure that I click on the clipping mask icon to clip it to the layer below. And I'm just going to click and drag down to darken that up. Then I'm going to go into the channels and into the red channels. So the way that each channel works is we have red, green, and blue, and there's this center line. So if I drag up on each channel, I'm going to get more color of whatever channel that is. In this case, I'm in the red channel, so dragging up gives me red. If I were in the blue channel and I drag up, I get blue. And obviously, if I'm in the green channel and drag up, I'll get green. And if I drag down, I'll get the opposite color. The opposite of red is cyan, so I get cyan. The opposite of green is magenta, and the opposite of blue is yellow. Anyway, in the red channel, I'm going to click in the center and drag up to get red. So now she has red hair. And I'm noticing that I'm not really liking the positioning of the hair. So I'll right click on the hair layer and convert it into a smart object so that I can distort it non-destructively. Then I'll press Ctrl-T on Windows, Command-T on the Mac, right-click, and select Flip Horizontal. But what I need to do now is distort it even further. So I'm going to commit the changes by clicking on the check mark. Then I'm going to go into Edit, Puppet Warp. The Puppet Warp will allow you to distort an image by using pins. By the way, I have my mesh disabled. So if you see a mesh and you would like to disable it, you can click on this checkbox from the options bar to disable it. Start by creating 3 pins. I'll create my first one down here, then I'll create one in the middle and one on top. Then click on the center pin and drag it to the left to distort these pixels. Then I'll click and drag on the top one a little bit. And here's the trick for you. If you hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac while you have a point selected, you'll see this circle around the image. Then you can click and drag to rotate the pin, which distorts the image further. When you're happy with your transformations, you can click on the check mark to commit the changes. What I'll do now is sort of what I did with the hair back here. I'm going to create a new solid color fill layer, but before I do that, I'm going to select the eyedropper tool and select one of these dark colors. Notice that I'm not selecting anything but white. That's because the layer mask is selected, but if I click on the adjustment layer thumbnail, I can click and then I'll select the color. So I'm going to select these dark reds. Then I'll go into the new adjustment layer icon, select solid color, and Photoshop will automatically select the dark red I chose with the eyedropper tool. Then press OK and we'll convert it into a clipping mask by pressing Ctrl-Alt-G on Windows, Command-Option-G on the Mac. Then we'll hide the contents of the layer mask by clicking on the invert button from the properties panel. And that, of course, makes the layer mask black, which hides the contents of the layer. And you can selectively bring back areas of your layer mask by using the brush tool and painting with white. Like so. And this looks pretty cool. What do you think? What I'm going to do now is select that color fill layer, click on it, and I'm going to hold Shift and click on the hair layer and press Ctrl-G on Windows, Command-G on the Mac to put these layers into a group, and I'll call it hair because I want all of those layers together. I'm going to click on the layer mask icon to create a layer mask, and I'll paint with black so that I can blend the hair layer better with the background. If I want to highlight certain areas of the hair, what I can do is open up the hair layer group, create yet one more curves adjustment layer, clip it to the layer below, and I'm just going to drag up. See that? See how it's creating that highlight? And again, click on the layer mask, click on invert, and just paint with white in areas where you want to reveal that highlight. And you can bring down the opacity of this adjustment layer to reduce the intensity of the highlight. So totally up to you how you want your highlights to be. I'll double click on the hand tool, and the model layer is looking fantastic. What I'm going to do now is create the mask that's going to cut out her back and the flowers are going to fly out of it. To do that, I'm just going to go into the lasso tool and I'm going to freehand a selection that is going to come pretty far down and like so. Right now, with that selection active, if I click on the layer mask icon, it's going to keep what I selected. I'm going to press Ctrl-Z, Command-Z on the Mac to undo. If you want the opposite to happen, to keep everything but what you selected, hold the Alt key on Windows, that's the Option key on the Mac, and click on the layer mask icon to hide the contents of that selection. Next, we're going to work on the flowers that are flying out of her back. So I'm going to go into the libraries panel, and here I have 2 flower photos that we'll use. I'll start by double clicking on these rose petals to open them up in a new tab, and I'll close the image of this hair strand because we don't need it anymore. I will not save it, and I'll also open up the other falling rose petals by double clicking on them. And here's a technique to select something that is up against a white background. We're going to use one of the oldest tools in Photoshop, which is the Magic Wand tool. We're going to set a low tolerance of 6 and make sure that contiguous is checked. And I'm just going to click once on the white areas and notice how it's just selected the white pixels of the image. If I hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click on the layer mask icon, Photoshop will hide the white background. Next, select the Move tool and click and drag the flowers onto your working document, and you can drop them here. But this time I'll make sure that I'm working in the right group. So what I'll do is I'll click and drag these flowers onto the flowers group, and I'll rename this layer flowers. And you can't see the flowers because they're really big. So if I press Ctrl-0 on Windows, Command-0 on the Mac, I'll zoom out and you'll see the transformation handles. So I'm just going to scale them down. And I'm going to rotate them and keep scaling them down. Then I'll press Ctrl-0 or Command-0 to zoom in. And now I can place it accordingly. So let me see what would look better in this case. I think that if I put them here, it follows that curve really, really nicely. So I can just place those right there. Next, we'll remove the white outline created by the mask. So press B on the keyboard to select the brush tool. Then select the layer mask. And make sure that your foreground color is set to black. Then brush out that white outline. And now that I'm already hiding things on this mask, what I'm gonna do is also hide some of the petals here in the bottom. And now with the Move tool selected, you can hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click and drag to duplicate. You can scale them down a bit and rotate them so that they look a little different. And then these could go up a bit higher, like so. Maybe even transform them horizontally. And I guess I have to rotate them the other direction, like so. And maybe I can select the original flowers group once again, Control J, Command J on the Mac to duplicate. That's another way of duplicating layers. And just go to the other side and just cover those edges. And again, paint with black on the petals you want to hide, like so. And this whole next step is totally up to you. You can keep duplicating petals as much as you want, or you can use the second technique I'm going to show you. I'm going to double click on the other rose petals that I'm going to work with. I'll use exactly the same technique to mask out the background. I'll select the Magic Wand tool, make sure that tolerance is set to 6, make sure that contiguous is checked, and I'll click on the white background to select it and hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click on the layer mask. That's perfect. Next, I'll apply the layer mask because I really want to get rid of it. And what I'll do now is just simply click and drag on a rose petal, and I press Control C, Command C on the Mac to copy, and then just paste it here and transform it accordingly and move it to a specific location. So I could start building my own petals accordingly. Obviously, that is more time consuming, but that gives you the flexibility of selecting the petals that you want and the position that you want them in. If you're going to use this technique, then here's a tip. Select the lasso tool and freehand a selection around a petal. Then with the main petal's image selected, press Control-Shift-J on Windows, Command-Shift-J on the Mac, and that jumps that petal into a new layer. It doesn't duplicate the petal, it just puts it in a new layer. I'm also going to do the same thing for the one in the bottom, so I'll draw a selection around it. If you miss a piece, you can hold Shift and click and drag to add to the selection. Then you can press Control-Shift-J on Windows, Command-Shift-J on the Mac to jump this petal onto its own layer. Now that the petals are in their own layer, all you need to do is select the petal and click and drag it into your working document and scale it accordingly. Obviously, this step takes a little bit more time, but it does give you good results because you can place the petals wherever you like. One other thing that you should do is select a layer with petals. For example, this one, duplicated, press Ctrl-J on Windows, Command-J on the Mac. Come up here, and you can apply the layer mask by right-clicking on the layer and selecting Apply Layer Mask. Then you can double-click to the side of the layer to bring up the Layer Style window. And click on Color Overlay and make sure you have black selected. Press OK one more time, and now you can go into Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and then you can create a shadow for those petals and place it anywhere that you want. And maybe you don't do them all, just a few like so, and you can bring down the opacity so that they're not so strong, totally up to you. And also the original poster had a blue tint to it, so I'm just going to do the blue tint under the roses. So above the model layer, I'm going to create a solid color fill layer. I'll select blue, press OK, and change the blending mode to color, and then reduce the opacity. And then just give it just a slight blue tint, like so. In this video, I'm not going to worry about the text, but what I'm going to do now is pause the video and work on the petals. Okay, I'm back. I haven't used any technique that you haven't seen. All I've done was just fine-tune the adjustment layers, the rose petals, and everything in my document to make it look the way that I want. This is my final result. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Also, if you enjoyed the tutorial or saw a technique that you think will help you in your process, make sure that you hit that like button now and let me know what that technique was down in the comments below. Don't forget to give me suggestions for the next Copycat Wednesday. Again, you can leave them in the comments down below. If this is your first time at the Photoshop training channel, don't forget to click on that subscribe and notification button so that you don't miss any new tutorials or any new Copycat Wednesday. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you're staying healthy and safe during this lockdown. I will talk to you again in the next Photoshop tutorial.